Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'm going to be sharing ghost stories from Texas. Let's get into it. Story 1. I was around 12 years old or so, and I had spent the night at my mother's. I lived with my grandma, but I go to my mom's when it's the weekend, and everyone in the house was asleep. I was sleeping in the living room, and it was dark. Not that dark because of the light that was in the kitchen. And I woke up around 5 a.m. I heard a voice and it told me to leave the house, and it sounded like it was right next to me. I was so scared that I stayed up until I fell asleep again staring at the ceiling. Then I heard footsteps on the floor and looked and saw a shadow, and I thought that it was my stepdad going to the restroom, but instead of going to the restroom, it was going after me. I shouted my mother's name and the shadow disappeared, and my mom came running into the living room. I told her about it, and she just said that we had to talk about it in the morning. We both went to sleep, and in the morning, my mother simply told me that the house was haunted. Story 2. I have lived in my current residence for a little over 6 years now. It's a small, costly yellow brick house. It has a rather large backyard. The first night I stayed there, I had strange dreams about a young girl. She was no younger than at least 6. I only had these dreams for a day or two, but much stranger things began to happen in my conscious world that soon terrified me. I'm a person who loves to sing, so on a sunny day, home alone, doing some chores, I start to sing aloud to myself. I'm walking around the house singing while I'm doing laundry and things. After a while I start humming, then I completely stop singing. No more than 5 minutes after I stopped, I started to hear the same song I was singing, faintly in my attic. I stopped what I was doing and started to listen. The voice was much higher than mine, so I could tell she was a little girl. The song started to get louder. I started to freak, then remembered the girl in my dreams. Remembering what my stepfather had told me about spirits, I reacted. He believed that if you told them to go, calmly and unafraid, they would be compelled to leave you. I started to think and say aloud, "Leave me, you are not wanted here." Soon the voice got fainter, and the song faded from the house. Still to this day, occasionally when I'm alone, I'll sing to myself. No voice is heard, no song of innocence. The girl had left my home, but resided in my mind from then on. Story 3. It was a hot June at my grandparents' house and very boring. I desperately needed something to do. It is such a joy staying with old people. The town she lives in isn't that big. It is called Kermit. I really didn't think anything cool was going to happen that summer. I gave up all hopes of fun and excitement. It was late at night, and I decided to go to sleep in the last room in the back of the house with my little sister. She woke up saying she heard noises, but I didn't pay attention to her and went back to bed. Whoever listens to their younger siblings. I woke up a little later and saw a figure of a person standing by the bedroom door. It just kept on looking at me and was probably standing there all night. I even kept covering my head thinking it would go away. A childish act, I know. At least it helped a little bit. Then my little sister woke up and said, "Who is standing by the bed?" The shadow just moved from the door to the bed. Then it was morning, and I told my grandma what happened, but she wouldn't listen. I felt so ignored. So when night came, my sister and I decided to sleep in the living room with my brother. At least if the ghosts attack us, we have an older brother to back us up, or sacrifice himself, whatever comes first. We went to sleep and kept on hearing footsteps, heavy footsteps, and all of a sudden, I saw glowing green eyes. It was impossible for it to come from a car. Besides, my grandma's block is very dark. This time my brother saw something creepy. He saw someone peeking through the window and immediately shouted, "There's a ghost looking at us." He jumped up and turned on the light, and nothing was there. I sighed. Half of me sort of wanted to push him towards the ghost, then scream my head off while running away, but then again my mom would have killed me. We would never really know the secrets of those shadows, but to this day, I don't like going back to my grandma's. My parents forced me to, though. I don't think they've seen what I've seen. Story 4. When I was younger, my family and I used to live in an apartment in El Paso. Every night my little sister would go into the corners and talk to a guy named Bob. She told us Bob used to live here, but I thought it was just her imagination. Then, really late at night, I heard voices. My little sister was sitting by the closet talking to a man. At least, that's how the voices seemed like. It was so creepy that I just left the light on every night until the fear went away. A couple of days later, my parents kept on seeing a shadow of a man in the hall. Then at 3 o'clock in the morning, we heard knocking on the front door. My dad decided to stay up and see who was knocking on the door. He heard the knocking on the door, opened it up, but nobody was there. It was scary since we didn't know who or what was doing the banging. It was also getting worse with my sister talking to Bob. My parents just decided to move and we got a new house. I don't know who lives there now. I'm just really glad I left. I really don't like it that my sister named her huge teddy bear Bob, though. Story 5. A long time ago, when me and my sister were young, we went to visit my aunt. It was going to be her birthday, so our parents made her a surprise party. My sister and I were so bored and we wanted to walk around her street to get some fresh air. I remember it was really dark and cold and nobody really lived by there. As we were walking, we stopped to hear the voices of children. I was 14 at the time and my sister was 8, but the weird thing is when we looked, nobody was there, so we just kept on walking. But I had tripped on something and fell. We looked down and we saw a railroad track. It was so scary because it wasn't there a minute ago. My sister was so scared she started to cry, but I told her it was okay and we would go home. But it wasn't okay. I was lost and I didn't want to tell her and make her cry more. As we were standing there, a little girl and a little boy popped up out of nowhere. They looked pale and scary as if they were dead. I asked them their names and they said Sarah and Jack. I asked them if they knew how to get to a road that would lead us home, and they both helped us. They walked us to the street, and as soon as I saw my aunt's house, I was so happy. I asked them if they wanted to come in, and they just stood there. I ran inside to tell my parents. They just looked at us as if we were crazy, and I pulled my mom to the door to show her the kids that had helped us, but they were gone. We looked for them, but it was as if they'd vanished without a trace. My aunt freaked out when we told her their names, and she told us a story I would never forget. She said a long time ago there was an accident. A bus had broke down on top of railroad tracks. They tried to get out, but the door wouldn't open, and all of a sudden a train was coming. They were trapped, all 17 of them, including the driver, and they all died in a crash. And ever since, people say they see them, and when you park your car on top of the railroad tracks, they push your car out of the way, in case of a train comes. They can save you, and they even have streets named after them. But I couldn't believe it. I looked at my aunt and my sister and stayed quiet all night. The next morning we were ready to go. We said goodbye to my aunt and got in the car. As we left, I saw the names Sarah and Jack on street signs, and ever since that day I have called them angels. Story 6. My story begins a couple of years ago. I just moved into my new apartment and was beginning a new life as a returning college student, working part-time as a bookkeeper for a grocery store. 2 months pass, my life is pretty much settled into its new routine. One day, after pulling another all-nighter for an exam, I hop into bed shortly before the sun rises, anxious to catch up on my sleep before the start of my first class, which for this particular day wasn't until 1 in the afternoon. It wasn't long before I started to feel myself drifting off, when from out of nowhere I spotted an orange ginger-colored cat skulking around my legs at the foot of my bed. When I tried to move to get a better look at it, though, I found myself paralyzed, to the point I was lying on my side, facing my room directly across from my closet, with my right arm tucked under my pillow. From the corners of my eyes, I could still see the cat. It was small, about the size of a 6-month-old kitten, but I could never see its face. It would always walk out of my line of vision or turn its head just enough so that I could never get a good look at it. For whatever reason, it kept trying to get under my covers, but there was something about this cat that didn't feel right. I didn't think it was there to hurt me, but I felt like it was malicious and dangerous somehow, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it, so I struggled against it. I fought hard, but it was difficult because it felt like something was holding me down from the inside out. The best I could do was to move in short, jerky movements. I tried to yell too, but it was no good. Nothing better than weak moans. Despite this, however, I managed to keep the cat out for a short period of time until it finally managed to find an opening that I wasn't able to move quickly enough to block off. Watching it sliding under my covers made me panic, and that gave me just enough strength to free my arm from under my pillow. But just as I did, I felt something grab my wrist and push my arm back down just over my head. As the cat disappeared under my blanket, I felt an urge to look towards my closet, and there I saw jet black smoke pouring out from under the cracks. I panicked again, only this time I also became very angry, and I pushed against whatever was holding me down. I don't know if it was from my own power or if this thing just gave in, but I was freed, and the first thing I did was barrel towards the closet door, because in the heat of the moment, I wanted to face whatever was in there. Despite being so scared, I was just so enraged. But when I reached my closet and attempted to open the door, it wouldn't budge, and then this horrible mocking laughter filled my head. It was enough to make me dizzy, and I had to take a few steps back until I reached my bed again. I sat down to help regain my equilibrium, but then as I looked up to resurvey my situation, I saw this dark spot forming in the upper right-hand corner of my room. It spread quickly like ink in water, and before I could do anything about it, I blacked out. When I came to again, I was back in bed. The first thing I did was look for that damn cat, but it wasn't there, and neither could I find any evidence that it had ever been there. And when I looked through my closet, everything appeared normal. By this time, it was a little past 8 a.m., and nothing seemed unusual. I got back into bed and sat there for a very long time, trying to determine if what had just happened had only been a very lucid nightmare. It was strange, as I'd never had an experience like that before, and never a dream so real. After a while, with nothing else to go on, I attempted to shrug the experience off as a dream, but I was still shaken and found it hard to relax. I tried to force myself to go back to sleep because I had a long day planned later, but I just lay there staring up at my ceiling for a while, just kind of afraid to close my eyes. About 5 minutes pass. I'm finally beginning to really calm down, and then from the corner of my right eye, I see the orange ginger cat walking by the side of my head. Before I can react to it, I feel its tail hit me right under my chin. I leapt up in my bed into a full standing position, but the cat was nowhere to be found. To this day, I still question whether my experience had been real or just a very vivid hallucination, but the feel of that cat's tail on my skin remains a very constant reminder of that moment of my life. Since then, I have never had a similar experience. Story 7. It started when I woke up thirsty and needed something to drink so I can go back to sleep. I started to move, and all that moved was my head. I then noticed that there were hands on my shoulders that felt strong enough to hurt me if they wanted to. I laid my head back down and started thinking, and when I did, every hair on the back of my neck and all the way down my back stood up like I had been shocked by something. I then, with all my strength, threw myself up, and hands lifted me, restraining me, but also pushing me as if it wanted to give me a sign, but it let go, and that's all that happened. A couple of years ago, I was sitting on my porch and got the same feeling. When I looked up, there was a dog walking towards me with blood-red eyes. I blinked to see if it was real, and when I blinked, it was standing 3, maybe 4 feet away from me. The weird thing was that the dog was about 20 feet away from me before I blinked. I blinked again, and it vanished before my eyes. I now believe deeply in ghosts, but I never thought it would actually touch me. Story 8. One of my best friends rented an old, very large 2-story house with wooden floors and a large staircase entrance in the front and a small one in the back. There were around 6 of us that lived in the house. We had parties all the time there. One night, in the back of the house, some girls started to look up at the windows of the house and did not want to go in. They said they were scared. I said, "It's a big house, but nothing bad in there. I never felt a bad spirit." Well, we all partied, then I went to sleep. I woke up and saw a black shadow on top of me. I looked around in the room, and my friends were asleep. I saw a black shadow of a face in front of me, and a ringing in my ear, and a buzzing sound. Then I couldn't move. I could see the shadow and said, "Get off my chest." Then it let me go and floated towards the door, then went through it. I then got up and walked to my friend's bedroom and woke him up and said, "You won't believe what happened." He said, "You saw the ghost? It watches me every night." I freaked out because we partied the night before at our house. We had a bunch of people over and he woke up out of a deep sleep and I woke him up and he never told me about a ghost at the house. He wakes up, looks at me and how scared I was, and it's daylight outside, and did not ask me what happened. He just said, "You saw the ghost. It watches me every night. It stands by the door and watches me." My jaw dropped. I just couldn't believe what happened. I always heard marbles rolling on the ceiling and creaks throughout the house after that, but nothing at the house ever happened again like that. Story 9. A few nights ago I was chatting away with my friends on MySpace. I was the only one awake and was already a little shaken up by the creaks that the house made. I silently sat back to take a breath when I heard the panting of a dog. Freaked out, I turned around quickly to look and see if one of my dogs had wandered into the room. Then there was a heavy, moist breath on my foot, along with the panting noise of a dog. Scared nearly half to death, I ran downstairs and crawled into my bed. Sure, my imagination pulls tricks on me, but not that good of tricks. You may say, whatever, I'm just a young kid, but I know what I heard and what I felt. Since then, my mom had told me she had heard the scratching of a dog on a door when all of our dogs were inside. Many other things have happened here in our old house, and I'm glad that we're moving out of it. I mean, my sister seen an old lady, a man, and a little girl, plus 2 ghost dogs. That's just plain crazy for us to stay living there. Therefore, we're moving out. That's vinyl. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.